let me take this opportunity to ask our Deputy President to give us this lecture that we've been waiting for quite a very long time. Mr. Deputy President.
I should say there'll be an opportunity for Q&A after the Deputy President has finished his address.
Is this one on? Thank you, Marupin, for the introduction. Marupin has a very long title. It's called Minister in the Presidency responsible for monitoring, evaluation, planning. And she likes saying to people, I'm her boss. But I think when it's said when it's all said and done, she's the boss of all of us. Because she must check whether we have proper plans, and then she come to monitor them, evaluate them, and she tells us if we are going wrong. But thank you very much for the introduction. President Zain, once again, thank you for inviting us and receiving us this afternoon. Let me also recognize ministers and deputy ministers who are traveling with us. Deputy Vice Chancellor for Education, Professor Joanna Newman. Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Knowledge Exchange, Professor Laura Hammond. Deputy Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operation, Kadit Mier. And all professors here present. I may not have been given a list of everybody, but all of you distinguished guests, good evening to all of you, including our High Commissioner, who has joined us, Date Mamabulu, Deputy High Commissioner as well, Dineo Matlako. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying that I am truly honored to have been invited to address this esteemed gathering at SOAS University this afternoon. I also want to thank SOAS for accepting me to do my postgraduate studies at this university. However, Marupin, owing to increased workload, I had to delay my studies. I think you might think I'm running away. I had to delay my studies, especially this year because of a lot of responsibilities that came with the government of national unity. I do think things will settle down at some point. And now that I'm here, I'm sure I will be motivated to return to come and continue my studies. Let me also thank SOAS for having opened doors for many students all over the world, especially from the African continent. Many of them have achieved their master's degrees, and you may not believe that, in fact, many of them are ministers in government, some of them CEO of major corporates and banks. So we must thank SOAS for that. In one of our South African languages, Sesotho, we say Ria leboga, meaning we thank you most sincerely. We want you to continue to offer this kind of opportunities to many out there, especially in the African continent. I'm currently the chairperson of the Human Resource Development Council in government, And I would like to create an opportunity for the HRDC to partner with SOAS so that we can increase skills that are required by our economy, particularly focusing on young people. My delegation and I, as Minister Marupin Ramokgopa said, are here in the United Kingdom to build on the outcomes of the state visit that was undertaken by President Ramaphosa in 2022, with a specific focus on how we can work together to ensure inclusive economic growth and ensure a balance and increase of trade between South Africa and the United Kingdom. As I said earlier, some of the ministers will be interacting with you this evening. Some are busy with other meetings elsewhere, but also there are some government officials here you can chat to later. As we gather here today, we all know that there are major mega trends that are influencing the world, including globalization, geopolitical inequalities, environmental crisis, climate change, demographic changes, and also technology convergence, but more seriously, poverty and wars. Let's look at some of the statistics. The current global population is estimated to be 7.7 billion people. However, forecasts indicate that it will grow to 8.5 billion by 2030 and 9.7 billion by 2050. Half of the 2 billion individuals predicted to be added to this population actually come from Africa. The problem is that as the population growth increases, inequality also rises, endangering peace and stability worldwide, and especially in Africa. Furthermore, the world is rapidly urbanizing, with predictions that 70% of the world's population will reside in cities by 2030. This is a call for investing where people reside. Specifically, we need to focus also on rural infrastructure, because if we don't do so, people leave for the cities. So it's important that we should prioritize developments in our rural areas. I visited China at some point when I was still chairman of the ANC in Gauteng, and one of the things they indicated to my delegation was that they had a big challenge of many people in rural areas moving to cities. They decided at that time that they must now put a lot of infrastructure in rural areas, ensure that there are proper roads, telecommunication, and it worked for them, because as you know that China is a big population, and their migration to cities were millions of people. And because of that approach, they were able to get more people to stay in rural areas and farm, proper roads to take their products to cities, and did not have to leave rural areas. So we should see this as a chance to attract more investors to rural areas. As we said earlier, we are talking to a lot of investors here in London, and most of them are happy to come to South Africa to invest. And we brought amongst us the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, who has been talking to them about opportunities in those rural and farming areas. As government, we believe that we must prioritize urban planning solutions that can also adapt to these changes. This includes investing in ecosystem and infrastructure needed to ensure a decent standard of living for all people. This will also necessitate the building of new cities on well-located land with amenities to ensure a better life for all citizens. We made a mistake when we came into power 30 years ago because we were under pressure to provide housing to our people. We started building houses closer to where the townships are. Now, if you know South Africa, you know that most of our townships are outside major cities. In fact, a bit far away from industries. And people are spending a lot of money paying for transport to reach their places of employment. We later realized that that's a big problem, and we have started changing that. And I had an opportunity at some point to be a provincial minister of housing. We call them in South Africa MECs. MECs mean member of the Executive Council. The national minister said to us at the time when we came into power in 1994, and they said to us, don't call yourself ministers. You are MECs. So we couldn't use a word provincial minister or anything. They said, don't touch. So we were MECs. We are still MECs if you are in a province. So I happened to be an MEC for housing, and we started turning that around and started identifying well-located land closer to industries and building houses and including social housing, because the subsidy from the South African government focused on people who were at the low end. I think those were earning even less than 5,000 a month household income. And there was a gap. Those who were earning a bit more than that, 7,000, 8,000 a month, but can't get bonds from banks, were left out. So we started introducing solutions to address people who were in that gap market so that they can also get housing. And that necessitated us to build a lot of social housing, including flats. South African people did not like flats, and not like here in London. Everybody wanted their yard and so on. So we had to say to people, look, there are many people who need housing. We had to start building flats through social housing. Now, according to the 2023 Atlas of Sustainable Goals, the global Gini coefficient has fallen since 1990 from about 70 to 62% in 2019, which represents significant progress in reducing global inequality. This suggests that despite progress in reducing inequality, a significant gap still exists between the rich and the poor, indicating the need for more global work to promote economic equality. As I said earlier, climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our time, and as we all know, it poses a significant threat to humanity and the planet. It is a complex problem that demands urgent and consistent action from every individual, organization, and government. So our government has committed to using the insights and recommendations from the State of Climate Action in South Africa report to inform the scaling up of the country's actions to respond to climate change. We have also agreed that when we host the G20 next year, this will be one of the important agenda items, because we're taking over from Brazil by the 1st of December. South Africa will take over the presidency of the G20, and we are hosting the G20 in 2025. We are actively adopting sustainable practices to reduce the carbon footprint. The global community must unite to address this issue with utmost seriousness and commitment. So this is a very important issue, and even in my meeting before I came here with the Secretary of State, Edie Miliband, we discussed this matter regarding the issue of climate change, the net zero, how do we move through the just transition, and also the support that the big economies can give to us in the developing world. The other thing that is important that worries everybody is the need for peace in the world. So we call upon world leaders to work for peace. In particular, in Africa, as you know, we still have conflicts in places like Sudan, the DRC, Mozambique, and so on. But we also want to ensure ceasefire so that in places like Palestine, the people of Palestine can rebuild and establish an independent state existing side by side with Israel. They deserve that. We must do everything in our power to end conflict in the Sudan, in the DRC, and all other parts of the world. My message is always, the wars must end. Let's resolve our differences through negotiations. So that's what we're going to continue to do. As some of you might recall, that our president actually led a delegation with other presidents to go to Kyiv in Ukraine to really try to persuade the parties in conflict there to negotiate a peaceful settlement. And I remember asking the president a question, how did you get there? Because, you know, there are missiles everywhere. So he said, we had to take a train. So I was imagining the president in a train. So I said, was it a blue train? He said, no, an ordinary train. Even my back is still sore. But it showed the commitment of leaders to peace. They took a train right into Kyiv to try and negotiate for peace. I was told by the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs here that he also took a train when we met this morning. But we really sincerely call all the leaders, let's commit to peace so that citizens can get an opportunity to better their life, concentrate on important things, to grow their economies, and be able to look after their families. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to speak a little bit about what's happening in our country, the country of Nelson Mandela, Bishop Tutu, Ruth First, Fatima Meer, Albert Luthuli, Oliver Tambo, Winnie Mandela, and many great heroes and heroines of our people. Now, what happened in this land of Nelson Mandela this year is that our voters who casted their votes, they did so in a manner that did not give any particular party a majority. You are all aware of that. You know, when we're campaigning, I got asked this question many times. What do you think the ANC will get in this election? And I said, well, I think 57%. And in one of the rallies somebody says, no, DP, I think 60. But it was not to be. So come the result, when the results were coming in, we all wake up in the morning to check the screens, and I realized that we are below 50. So I called one of our deputy secretaries who was there, Comrade Nomvula, and saying, hey, I'm worried about this. And she said, no, Spokes, don't worry. They call me Spokes. Don't worry, Spokes, this thing is going to change. You know, we're still expecting a lot of numbers from Soweto and all these places. So I felt better. Come the evening, slowly I went to sleep, wake up in the morning, check, 42. I was like, no, Mvula, don't worry. It will become better. And, well, ladies and gentlemen, the voting ended, and where we were at that time was 40.8. And that was it. They were closing. And we realized, and one of my friends, Nkenke Kakana, called me and said, we have lost the elections. He says, because he was at the voting station, so he says one of the biggest challenge he had was, how do I call my leaders and tell them this? So he did, and he said, we have lost the elections. So we then decided, what do we do at that point? And the president said, look, let's constitute a negotiating team that can start talking to other parties. We did so, spoke to the EFF, spoke to MK Party, Democratic Alliance. At the end of those negotiations, we had spoken to 18 parties. But then the challenge was that they all came with conditions. So the EFF said, we will work with you if you don't bring the DA. Okay. MK Party, we will work with you, but Ramaphosa must go. Wow. So that's difficult. How do we let our president go just like that? So they were not in. In fact, many people don't even know that we met them 4 times and we didn't win. The EFF, 4 times, no, we're not coming in. We don't want to work with neoliberals. So the president said, okay, let's continue to talk to others. Now the team was saying, the guys who have 1 seat, the president said, yeah, talk to them. And you won't believe today, the government of national unity is constituted, amongst others, by people who have 2 seats, 1 seat. Now the biggest challenge, of course, was, okay, how do we share seats in cabinet? So the president said, well, because these guys are committed to work with us, even if they have 1 seat, appoint them as ministers. Very nice. In fact, one of the leaders, Gayton McKenzie, I was with him during Heritage Day in the Free State, and he said, you know, people are saying Gayton McKenzie is happy. He said, yes, I'm happy. You know, the president appointed me, and they have, I think Gayton has about 3 seats or 6 or so. But we decided, the president said, look, this is how people voted. They want us to work together. So that was the birth of the government of national unity. We are now more than 100 days in office, or close to that. And you won't believe we have not been fighting. In fact, many people said this thing is not going to last. Can you imagine the DA, the ANC from that side? How do these people work together? But the president did something very clever. Said, let's agree on principles, firstly. And he coined something called statement of intent. And the president was drafting this himself. We kept this and he said, this is a statement of intent. So I said, what do you want to do? He says, everybody must commit to this. Then we said, guys, anybody who comes here, respect for the Constitution of South Africa, the rule of law, our independent judiciary. And we said, we have to agree on a number of these issues, advancing inclusive growth, economic growth, so that we can create jobs for our people, and poverty, deal with high cost of living, and so on. So we agreed on all those issues that we thought they are important. And the president said, everybody who agrees with our statement of intent must sign. And I can tell you as we speak, 10 parties signed. So it is 10 parties that constitute the government of national unity today. So our strategy as we are traveling now, we're doing it as a government of national unity. But when you meet us in these round tables here, you won't know who's ANC, who's DA. We all sing the same tune because of that agreement. The president said, guys, you come from different parties, but there's one commander-in-chief. You all account to me as the president, and here's your Bible. Go do whatever, but we keep to this. So if you were to ask me, is the government of national unity working? The answer is yes. Will it last for 5 years? I think so. And the reason I say I think so is because we are able to deal with the challenges that we are facing. In fact, one of the things the president did recently, he said to me, you know what, we are a government of national unity coming from different parties. I want to invite all the leaders for dinner at my house. And I said to the president, a good idea. And the president said, guys, come. Don't bring your iPads and books. We're just going to talk, know one another, and relax, have dinner and drink wine. And everybody came. We have now agreed beyond that dinner that we are going to create another layer as a clearinghouse, so that if there are issues where we don't quite agree, that structure will deal with those issues. And the president has asked me to chair that structure. The various parties will send some of their leaders or the second commander-in-chief of their parties to come to that structure. And we'll deal with a number of issues there. There was recently, I'm sure most of you heard about some concern about the Basic Education Amendment Act, the National Health Insurance, where some of the parties said to the president, we now agree, we are government of national unity, but can we talk about national insurance? There are issues we want to raise. So that structure will become the clearinghouse for those issues. But also plans for the future. We will also discussing the issues that relate to the convening and hosting of the G20 next year. So when we go back next week to South Africa, that structure will be meeting to look at issues that we should process so that when the leaders under the president meet, we would have processed a number of those issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said, we will assume the G20 presidency on the 1st of December this year, following the G20's Leaders Summit under Brazil, which is scheduled for 18 to 19 November in Rio de Janeiro. So beyond that, it will be South Africa's turn. And we want to do this in collaboration with the African Union and bring a lot of people closer to us, particularly to bring in the AU's Agenda 2063, which is the Africa we want. There are many people who want to get closer to the discussion at the G20. So we're looking how we can manage that. So some people said to me recently, can we attend as observers? So we're going to create an opportunity where we'll have the friends of the G20 so that people are able to attend and we can discuss a number of issues there. Of course, the G20 remains sensitive to the needs of Africa's and the global South developing economies. As South Africa, we believe firmly that the G20, with the United Nations at the center, are vitally important in accelerating implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. South Africa's presidency of the G20 will provide a unique opportunity to bring to the fore the needs, aspirations, and ambitions of the developing countries. That's what we're going to do. We will use this opportunity to build on the efforts and successes of those who managed the presidency before us from the Global South, India, Brazil, Indonesia. But as a country, we are considering the monitoring of past commitments, because the problem with summits like that is that you come with good resolutions and so on, and by the time you convene again, you repeat those things. So we want to monitor and say, okay, what were the agreements, how far are we now, and so on. Particularly given the fact that we are now at the end of the cycle when it comes to South Africa. So we are going to specifically look at sustainable development goals, and that's one of the things that Maropane is doing, to look at that. So that this forum, like others, does not become a talk shop. Because people like summits and conferences, but we want to focus on implementation, because we are worried about lack of progress in some of the commitments that have been made, particularly the lack of progress in enhancing these SDGs globally. looking at issues such as growing inequality, rising hunger, rising extreme poverty, the issue that I raised earlier about climate change, energy crisis. As you know, in South Africa, we come from serious problems of load shedding, but also the debt crisis. Many countries in the south, developing countries, are facing huge debts, illicit financial flows, all of which impede development, particularly in developing countries. So we will prioritize these issues. We want to ensure that we look at the financial architecture and reform of institutions like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and multilateral development banks. We are already discussing those issues, and we think it will be important that at the G20, these issues must not be lost. The theme for the G20 next year will be solidarity, equality, and sustainable development. That's what we're going to focus on. It is worth noting that while South Africa continues to prepare for its G20 presidency, we have been engaging broadly with other G20 members, including the United Kingdom, as I said earlier. We convened at the Sherpa level and also participated in February at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So South Africa will continue with the discussion around the reform of these global systems of government under our presidency. The reforms of the global governance institutions, we believe, is very important, and therefore we're going to make it an important matter. We want also to reaffirm our unwavering conviction that modernizing the United Nations to make it more effective, agile, and action-oriented, forward-looking, inclusive, and representative of current geopolitical relations and the international community is essential. South Africa has always been vocal about the need to reform these global systems, and we are concerned about lack of progress in these areas. The international financial architect in particular has not kept pace with changing global landscapes. We urgently need bold and ambitious reforms to create stable, sustainable, and inclusive international financial architecture, which will broaden and strengthen the voice and participation of the developing economies, ensure international economic decision-making, norm setting, and global economic governance in particular. We need to transform these institutions to make them fit for purpose, including by setting more ambitious targets for grant and concessional financing, enhancing multilateral coordination on debt, drawing in the private sector, and ensuring equal participation in decision-making. Ladies and gentlemen, as I move towards closure, let me say that while South Africa continues to prepare for its G20 presidency, we want to move towards concrete deliverables and finalize its agenda. Some of the things that I shared with you, bring them on board quickly. It is South Africa's hope that at the end of our presidency of the G20, we should look back with pride that we have been able to showcase the amplified voice, perspective, and leadership of the developing world in tackling some of these pressing global challenges. South Africa's hope is that its presidency of the G20 will contribute to making the world more equitable, more resilient, and more sustainable. Serious challenges we are facing in the world, serious challenges we are facing as a government of national unity, but I have no doubt that with the kind of energy that the government of national unity has, we will succeed. And I must say that wherever we traveled, Marupin was in the US with the president. I've been here in the UK, went to Ireland on Friday. And everywhere we go, people are very warm to us. And we think that come 2025, we will be growing South Africa at more than 2% of GDP. We will push that over the next 3 years to 3.5% of GDP, and by that time we will be able to create additional 1 million new employment. That's our plan. It always seems impossible until it is done. Thank you.